Hi everyone! We're going to look at some different selection tools in Photopea and how we can use those to remove part of an image, like maybe the background or maybe a specific part we want. To start off with, I just have a random sample image and we're just going to look at a few of the different tools that you should experiment with. A couple of the more basic ones. Click and hold that icon. We've got the rectangle and the ellipse. Both of those are just a standard shape, so the ellipse will let you select a circle, rectangle gets you a rectangle. If you ever select something and need to deselect it, you can Control D or just go to Select, Deselect for that. Some of the more interesting ones will let you kind of get more accurate with the shapes you're selecting. The more basic one is kind of lasso. You kind of just click and drag to make your shape. You can see mine isn't super accurate. If you wanted to make a really accurate one using this tool, you would probably have to zoom in quite a bit and go a little slower. If you need to zoom in, that's a Control plus to kind of go in or a Control minus to come out. You can do the same thing with your view or whatever works for your device. Let's deselect that. But we have some actually pretty useful tools. So first is polygonal. This is one where you kind of click from piece to trace. And I'm going to do a couple of weird ones just so you can see it's kind of adding corners. But you can actually go right along the edge of something, and especially if you zoom in a lot, and you'll see I actually zoomed while selecting. I'm just going to move my image over a little. You can do that by holding down the space bar and dragging. You can see I can actually get pretty accurate, and if I was willing to spend a really long time and make you watch me for a really long time, I could get super accurate with that. I'm not going to make you watch me do that, so let's get rid of that selection too. Let's go out a little so we can see that whole basketball. Next one, which is kind of an interesting one, is the magnetic lasso select. Now, I will say this tool sometimes goes a little slower, especially if you're doing browser-based, but the idea is you click and then you wait a little bit for the tool to actually show up. So you can see I'm moving my mouse, but nothing's happened yet. But in a couple of seconds, there we go. So now you can see I've got this kind of curvy line, and there's a little box where I clicked, but as I just move my mouse, you'll see it's kind of just going around the edge of the shape. And now I have kind of a problem here. Let's zoom in so you can see that. It's gone up against the black line of the basketball, and I want it to go around the orange edge. So I'm actually going to go backwards a little bit and say, well, I wanted it there. Oh, it doesn't really like it. It's kind of going around. There we go. Now we're going back around the basketball. But you'll notice just by flicking my mouse back and forth, it kind of moves. So even though this is kind of an obviously round shape, this magnetic tool isn't really the best one for it. If you have a good clean shape, you can kind of just wrap your mouse around the whole thing. If you don't have a clean shape, it's kind of more trouble than it's worth trying to use it. Let's try it on one more shape and just see if it's any better. And again, the other downside is you're kind of waiting a little bit. Normally, with the smart tools, that wait time is worth it because you get a better select, but magnetic tool, you can see kind of it's not the most accurate. It seems to jump around a little bit, so probably not one we'll use regularly, but experiment with it a little bit. Now, some of the smart tools. So you can see here there's Magic Wand, and there's a couple of others too. Let's go for let's go for Magic Wand. Magic Wand goes by color, so I'm actually going to zoom out a little so we can see our million orange objects. If I click on that orange, you'll see it kind of picked up two parts of the basketball, or if I click there, it actually picks up on all three of them. So it will pick up things with the same color. You'll notice the basketball is selected, but not the black stripes. You can kind of change around the settings a little. You'll see I have changed some of them. Contiguous means it selects shapes that are together. So if I actually uncheck that and I try again, and I select some orange, you'll see it picks up all the orange, not even touching, but it'll still grab all of them. You'll also notice it picked up like the lighter orange and the darker orange, even though they're not the same color. That's because I've got my tolerance pretty high. Just to show you what lower tolerance looks like, I've knocked it down to 11, and now we're going to try and grab just one of these. So again, with the magic wand, let's see if we can grab the dark orange without the light. And you'll see it grabbed a bunch of little bits, but it didn't actually grab the whole thing. So our tolerance is maybe a little too low. We're going to deselect that, and maybe let's try something in the middle, like 50 or 60. And you'll see now it grabbed this shape, but it also grabbed a little bit of the other one. So the thing about this is it's a little bit of a back and forth. Can you grab enough of the right shape and avoid the other color? Definitely harder on this image just because we have so many colors that are kind of like similar to each other. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to go to our two images we'll be working with first today. We've got a glass of water and we've got a fish. These are both images that you have. We're going to use one of the selection tools, but we're going to go for one of the smart selection tools. So we have a couple of options. There is Quick Select, which takes a long time to set up, kind of opposite of what Quick Select implies. But once you've got it set up, you'll see I clicked and the fish is outlined. And let's zoom in and take a look at that. Look at how accurate that is. That's way better than you could do with the magnetic lasso or the polygonal lasso on your own. Maybe you could do a little better with the polygonal if you spent an hour clicking, but it is a really good one. I'm going to deselect and show you what the other tool looks like. Object selection is one that got added to Photoshop just a couple of years ago, I think. The idea is basically put a rectangle around your object, kind of set it up so the plus sign is in the object. Ideally, it would only be touching the object and not the background. And again, it's going to select, and you'll see this one has like that little bump there. It's not quite as good as the other one, but that's still pretty close. I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to go back to my favorite, which is Quick Selection. I'm going to zoom in a little just so we can see that fish kind of in its entirety. And I'm just going to click once to select it. Perfect. Now, right now the fish is selected. If I were to get really crazy and delete it, it would get rid of the fish and keep the background. Probably not what we want. Usually, if you're going to be deleting something, you're going to be removing the background. To select the background while we have the fish selected, we can actually change what's being selected by going to Select Inverse. And now the background is selected instead of the fish. So basically everything that was selected before isn't selected now. If I delete, it takes away the background, it leaves the fish. Okay, you'll see there's still tiny bits of black around the edge. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. If you wanted to get more perfect, you'd have to spend a lot more time on it. Now, usually when we do this, whether we're doing it with a tool or our own hand-done selection, we don't like to actually delete. We prefer to use something called a mask. The idea is if I deleted this and I accidentally deleted a fin of the fish in addition to the background, and I didn't notice until later and I need to get that fin back, if it's deleted, I'm just going to leave my selection tool. You'll notice it lags a lot if you leave it sitting on the selection tool, but now that it's selected, I don't need to. If I delete the background and I accidentally get rid of a fin too, and I don't notice until an hour later, I switch back to select fish because that's what I would like to keep. I'm going to click down here. So in the layer panel, there's another little icon. It's a rectangle with a circle in it. Add mask. Okay, now you'll see the background is gone. You see that kind of gray and white checkerboard saying it's transparent or empty. And you can see here in the layer, there's two different icons. One is the fish itself. One is the background. So if you kind of take a look at that, fool around with hiding the background or hiding the fish. Right now they're connected. You can actually separate them and have them as two separate things. So if I wanted to just mess around with the background, I could kind of drag it around and check that out. It's the outline of the fish. And I'm just moving it around, and you'll notice the fish itself is staying in place. But the mask, the part that's showing, the black, is the mask. Anything that's not showing is the part that's hidden or deleted. And by kind of dragging this around, I can show different parts of the picture in the shape of that mask. We're going to mess around with this some other time because it's a very cool effect. But for now, I want to keep those, and actually I'm going to relink them so they stay together. That means if I move the fish, the mask will move with it. Okay. But basically, now in this one layer, which I'm going to call fish, I've got the fish, and the background is hidden, but it's still there. That way, if I accidentally did get rid of that fin, I can adjust my mask. For now, we're pretty good. I think we've got our fish. What we're going to do is actually put this in our other image, which is the water. Now, you have a couple of options. If you're going to save this, we're going to mix things up a little bit, and you would want to save as a PNG, so it keeps the transparent background. If you try and save as a JPEG, you will lose the transparent background. The other option is you can drag that layer directly in. So I'm going to click the layer and I'm actually going to drag it onto my other image and just drop it on that other tab. And now I have a fish. Okay? And I can click and drag around the fish, and as you notice, because it's in a different layer, when I drag the fish, it doesn't drag the water. The fish is too big for my water glass right now, so I think the last thing we want to look at is, can we change the size of that fish? So there is an image size option there, but we're going to go for edit, and we're actually going to go to transform and scale, because now we can kind of drag and change the fish size. Now if I just do it like this, you'll notice it's getting skinnier but not smaller. If I don't like what I did, there's a little check mark and an X, click the X. If I want to kind of get the whole thing and drag it to scale, let's actually move this fish down a little bit because it's a pretty big image. And let's do the same thing. So edit, transform, scale, and now you'll notice I have the corner. I can drag and make it smaller, and if I need to move it, I can still drag and move it. Yeah, it still needs to be a little smaller. There we go. And you can just stick it right in your glass of water. I think I want mine even smaller, so it's fully submerged. Okay, there's lots of other image options you want to play around with. You can kind of rotate, you can do lots of things. If you take a look at free transform, you'll notice it still looks the same. You have a little handle to drag, but if you move your mouse outside of that corner, you get the two little arrows. You can tilt that fish around. So you can rotate it whichever direction you want to, as well as kind of changing the size or dragging it around. So there's my fish hanging out in his water. You can try this yourself using the fish in the glass. Experiment with the different selection tools, see what works for you, and get yourself a fish and some water for today. Have fun!